before the lawnmower was invented, before synthetic fertilizer existed. The estates of the British and French aristocracy were producing lawns so perfect, so dense, so impossibly green, that visitors described them as carpets, as velvet, as surfaces so uniform they looked painted. These weren't rough pastures maintained by luck. They were the product of a slow, practical system, documented in 17th and 18th century garden books and passed down through generations of professional head groundsmen. One that worked entirely with nature instead of against it, and produced results that cost almost nothing to maintain. So what were they actually doing? And more importantly, could you do the same thing today? Let's find out. For 3 centuries, from roughly 1600 to the invention of the mechanical lawnmower in 1830, the great estates of England and France faced a labour problem with no industrial solution. A lawn at a place like Blenheim Palace or the gardens of Versailles was not a luxury. It was a direct expression of power. A nobleman whose grounds fell into rough pasture was a nobleman in decline. The pressure to maintain these spaces was enormous, and the men tasked with doing it, the head groundsmen, the turf keepers, the bowling green masters, developed methods so effective that some of them are only now being re-examined by modern agronomists. These are 6 of their most powerful approaches. 1. They never relied on topsoil. Long before anyone had written the words USCA root zone specification, estate groundsmen across Britain understood something that modern lawn care has nearly forgotten. Grass is only as good as the drainage beneath it. Waterlogged turf suffocates at the root. It invites moss, compaction, and disease. So before a single seed was sown on a prestige lawn or bowling green, the ground was prepared with intention. Period garden books and estate records describe the excavation of lawn areas and the laying of rubble, chalk, flint, or coarse gravel as a base layer to carry excess water away from the root zone. Over that would go sharp sand, and finally a thin layer of native loam or compost. What this created, while nobody was calling it by a technical name, was a layered drainage system similar in principle to the sand-based construction methods used on modern golf greens and sports pitches. The core idea is the same: move water down and away from the root zone, and give roots a medium they can breathe in. Modern turf engineers specify it down to the millimeter. The groundsmen of the 17th century worked it out by observation and necessity. If your lawn suffers from waterlogging, compaction, or persistent moss, you are not dealing with a grass problem. You are dealing with a soil structure problem. And the solution has been understood, in one form or another, for centuries. 2. Their fertilizer was free, and it was walking around the estate. There was no synthetic nitrogen in 17th or 18th century England. No urea, no ammonium nitrate, no slow-release granule. What the great estates had instead was an almost unlimited supply of one of the most effective soil improvers ever used: animal manure, applied through a practice called folding. Sheep, and sometimes cattle, would be penned overnight on sections of turf using portable hurdle fencing, depositing manure directly onto the grass. The pen would then be moved the following night to an adjacent section. Over the course of several weeks in early spring and again in autumn, the entire lawn surface received a consistent application of organic nutrients. This was not accidental. Head groundsmen understood that grazing animals improved turf density and suppressed coarser weeds. The hooves also acted as a natural aerating tool, breaking up surface compaction, opening the thatch layer, and pressing organic matter into contact with the root zone. A modern core aerator followed by a top-dressing application is, in essence, attempting to replicate in 2 machine passes what folding achieved in a single overnight operation. You do not need a flock of sheep. A single application of well-composted manure worked into the surface after aeration in early spring remains one of the most underused and cost-effective lawn treatments available to a modern homeowner. 3. The tool they used instead of a lawnmower. The scythe is dismissed today as primitive, but between 1600 and 1850, in the hands of a skilled craftsman working at dawn, when the dew was still on the grass and the blades lay flat, it was among the most precise cutting tools available for fine turf. The key is in the cut itself. A sharp scythe blade slices cleanly through the grass leaf. Compare that to a rotary mower, which works by spinning a blade at high speed and striking the grass horizontally, a process that tears rather than severs the leaf, leaving a ragged, browning cut edge that is more vulnerable to moisture loss and fungal infection. Research does support the idea that a cleaner cut means faster recovery from mowing stress and less tip browning. The modern equivalent of the scythe cut is a well-maintained cylinder, or reel, mower with properly sharpened blades, the type used on golf greens. A sharp rotary mower, well adjusted and cutting at the correct height, can also produce a good result for most residential lawns. But if you want the density and finish associated with a historic estate or bowling green, the quality of your cut matters enormously. Switch from a blunt rotary to a sharp cylinder mower, cut at a consistent height, and cut more frequently rather than removing too much at once. The method is centuries old. The agronomic logic behind it holds up. 4. They seeded with mixtures that have no modern equivalent. Here is something the modern lawn care industry has spent 50 years quietly moving away from. The lush, dense, drought-tolerant turf of the historic British estate was not made of grass alone. It was a mixture, primarily fine fescues and bent grasses, yes, but also white clover. Clover was not considered a weed in 17th and 18th century turf management. It was a feature, and a useful one. Head groundsmen observed through practice that clover improved turf density and vigor, particularly in lean, unfertilized soils. Modern science explains why. White clover fixes atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil through a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium bacteria in its root system. Depending on stand density, soil conditions, and moisture, a vigorous white clover population can contribute a meaningful nitrogen supply to the surrounding turf, with some university estimates ranging from 40 to over 100 pounds per acre per year under favorable conditions. Then in the 1950s, selective broadleaf herbicides like 2,4-D entered the mass market. Because these products killed clover along with other broadleaf plants, clover was reclassified, through advertising as much as agronomy, as a weed rather than a lawn component. Iowa State and Illinois State Extension programs both document this shift. Today, microclover is being actively reintroduced by sustainable turf managers and golf course operators looking to reduce synthetic nitrogen inputs. You can oversow microclover into any existing lawn today. It costs almost nothing. It reduces your fertilizer requirement, and it produces a surface dense enough to outcompete most common lawn weeds on its own. 5. They understood that frequent watering was the enemy. The instinct of the modern gardener facing a dry spell is to reach for the hose. The instinct of the experienced 18th century groundsman was more considered. The great estate lawns of Britain were maintained under a philosophy that agronomists now describe as deep, infrequent watering, and the root systems it produced were far more resilient than anything that develops under frequent shallow irrigation. The method was simple. Water deeply, but rarely, and only in the morning. Never in the heat of the day, and never in the evening when moisture would sit overnight and encourage disease. What deep, infrequent watering achieves is a training effect on the root system. When water is applied frequently and shallowly, roots remain near the surface, dependent on regular irrigation. When water is applied deeply, penetrating the top 6 to 8 inches of the root zone, as UC Cooperative Extension recommends, roots follow the moisture downward. Over a growing season of this management, turf develops a significantly deeper root system, one that accesses minerals surface roots cannot reach, anchors the plant against wear, and resists drought stress far more effectively. If you are watering your lawn several times a week at a shallow depth, you are not strengthening your lawn. You are making it dependent. Cut your irrigation frequency, increase the duration of each session, and water only in the early morning. The improvement in color, density, and drought resilience is measurable within a single season. 6. The real reason these lawns lasted for generations has nothing to do with grass. The longest surviving historic turf in Britain shares a common thread in its management history. That has nothing to do with seed variety or fertilizer regime. The practice is called top dressing, and it was applied as a matter of annual routine on any lawn maintained to a high standard. Every autumn, after the final cut of the season, a thin layer, rarely more than 1/4 of an inch, of sharp sand mixed with compost or fine loam, would be spread across the entire surface of the lawn. A long-handled wooden leveling tool called a lute, or simply a stiff broom, would work the material down into the turf canopy. The cumulative effect over years and decades was a gradual, continuous improvement in soil structure that never stopped. Each application slightly improved drainage. Each application added a modest increment of organic matter to the root zone. Each application leveled minor surface irregularities caused by frost heave or traffic. After decades of consistent autumn top dressing, these lawns had a root zone that was fundamentally different from the native soil beneath them. Modern turf science confirms this. The turfgrass information file and numerous university extension publications describe top dressing as one of the most effective long-term practices for improving turf density, controlling thatch, and smoothing uneven surfaces, and recommend it as an annual or biennial practice for any high-quality lawn. The practice costs almost nothing: a bag of sharp sand and a bag of compost, worked in by hand with a stiff brush after autumn aeration, is among the most enduring investments you can make in the quality of your lawn. It is also the practice most consistently absent from modern residential lawn care. So why did we stop doing any of this? The honest answer is the same one that explains why so many effective, low-cost solutions gradually disappear. There is no recurring revenue in a lawn that improves itself year over year. A clover-seeded, carefully watered, scythe-cut, top-dressed lawn does not need a monthly bag of synthetic fertilizer. It does not need a new mower every 8 years. It does not need a professional spray program. The methods described in this video were developed not to sell anything, but to produce results that lasted, in some cases across generations of the same estate and the same head groundsman's family. The modern lawn care industry was built around a different question: not what makes grass grow best, but what creates the most consistent repeat purchase. The groundsmen of the great estates did not have that problem. They were paid to produce results. And the results, where those methods have survived, speak for themselves. A lot of what this channel covers was nearly lost, not because it stopped working, but because the industry found something more profitable to sell in its place. If learning how to get more from your lawn with less is the kind of thing that matters to you, subscribing and liking is the simplest way to make sure this knowledge keeps being found. And leave a comment on which of these approaches you will try.